All right, hello. My name is Demeter Willow, and welcome back to Style and Book, where we dress up and talk about books and do all things fun and fantastical. Today, I'm finally getting around to doing something that I have been planning to do since I had decided to start this channel, which was a few months ago, and one of the main reasons for starting it to begin with, which is go through my Goodreads of everything I read in 2024. Yeah. And it's a little late, obviously, but I'm gonna do this as a roundup because I love to talk about the books that I read, and I have very few people to talk to about them, so I'm gonna ramble about them on the internet. Yeah, not much more to do about that. We're just gonna jump right into it because I read 80 books this year. So this is probably going to have to be in two parts because I'm long-winded at the best of times, and 80 books is a lot to get through. So this is going to be two or more parts. Yeah, let's just jump in. So first of all, I'm not going to do this in any particular order. I read a bunch of different genres, so we're going to see a lot, and I thought about potentially separating them into genres and doing the videos like that, but I think that's too complicated for me. So instead, I'm going to do chronological order. So the order in which I read them, starting from January of last year. And the last thing before we just jump right into it is I'm going to give you a rundown of how I use stars, which is on my Goodreads. So I have a place to remind myself of how I use stars. And I'm going to talk about the star ratings that I gave these books, and I'm probably going to change some of them because yeah, I took a glance and I was like, some of these aren't correct. So here, let's jump into it. So there's on Goodreads, there's a 5-star rating system. Obviously, for me, the way that I personally use this system is as follows, and I'm gonna be following on my computer because I don't have all this memorized. 1 star is hated it, would actively not recommend it. It made me mad. 2 stars is I don't really remember it, didn't like it, but wouldn't bother telling anyone anything about it really. 3 stars is I remember reading it, it was okay, I enjoyed it enough, but not enough to feel super strongly about it. 4 stars is I remember it, I enjoyed it, I wouldn't necessarily read it again, and I might recommend it. And 5 stars is I still think about it, it had a major impact on me, I will read it again and again. I talk about it to people and recommend it. And just a thing that I didn't put in here, but that I realized is necessary when I was looking through things, is that part of the 4 star category for me should be that it's like I might read it again as like a comfort thing or as a fun thing or as a familiar thing. Because there are books that I didn't necessarily like love like amazing. Like they didn't have like a life changing impact on me necessarily, but I would read them again as just like I liked certain things about them, and I would do it again. But I'm not necessarily gonna be like when someone's like, "Oh, what's your favorite book?" or when someone's like, "Recommend me a book." I'm not gonna be like, "Go read this thing. It changed my life." But that doesn't necessarily mean I wouldn't read them again. So that's an added element to 4 stars. So I should update that, but I will do that later. All right, let's jump into it with January. So the first book I read this year was Counterfeit by Kirsten Chen, and I was just scrolling through my books also. I can't wait to try and say some of these authors' names. That's going to be fun, but I will try if I can figure out how to do it in editing. I will try to put them on the screen, the covers and the names and the authors' names, because some of these I might just not even try. And if not, if I can't figure out how to do that in editing right now because I'm still brand new to this world, then I will put a list in the description and a link to my Goodreads so that you can go and look at them. All right, so Counterfeit. I gave this 5 stars, and I stand by this. This was such a fun book. It also was kind of a random one for me. I make a lot of my reading choices based on covers and titles, and then I just read a little bit and see if I like it. And if I do, I finish it. And if I don't, I stop. This was a book that I listened to, and I would highly recommend listening to it. The narration was freaking great. I don't think I would have liked this book as much if I had read it, like actually physically read it. It was just so good, and it was so fascinating. I had no idea what was going on the whole time. I loved all the twists and turns. This is about a pair of women who basically are selling counterfeit designer bags in the United States, and they're getting them from China, I believe. And it's so good, and the way that it's like told through the perspective of one of the women, sorry, and she's like in her like she's telling it to the cops, like to the police. It's just so good. I loved it. I stand by that 5-star rating. I freaking loved that book. It was just such a good time, and it was not anything that I expected, and I had a great time with it. It was a great start to the year. It was totally out of left field for me, and I really enjoyed it. Second book that I read is called Stranger in the Woods by Annie Taylor, and this is a thriller. It's, if I remember correctly, it's about a girl who ends up on a like photography, like she's Australian, she ends up like on a photography job in Scotland, and then she starts like discovering a bunch of weird shit, and it's like she's been there before, but she's like, I've never been here. Anyway, it's a thriller. It was okay. I liked it more to begin with. This was one where I got it to sleep to. I listen to books when I sleep, and when I'm in certain emotional states, I listen to thrillers to go to sleep. um, anyway, and this was one of those because it had a nice narrator, and then I got kind of hooked, and so I went and actually like listened to it properly when I was awake. And I would say like I liked the beginning of it more than I liked the progression. I kind of had to force myself through the last chunk of it. I gave this 3 stars, and I would say that's true. I didn't hate it. It didn't make me angry in any way. It was fine. I remember reading it. I'll always remember reading it. Like I remember the plot and stuff. But yeah, it wasn't anything special. The next book I read is Curse of the Arctic Star, which is the new Nancy Drew. So it's by Carolyn Keene. It's obviously ghostwritten. It's by somebody else. But they don't tell you the names of the people that write them. It's the Nancy Drew Diaries, so I believe this is like the new reboot. So this is like a middle grade book. I read Nancy Drew growing up, and I loved it. So that's why I read this. And again, like it was okay. It was definitely very like Nancy Drew, like absolutely. Yeah, I gave this 3 stars. It was, like I said, it was fine. I had a fine time reading it. I remember that I read it. um, it kind of ended on a little bit of a cliffhanger, sort of, because it's a series, and I guess the series are sort of connected, which isn't like the original Nancy Drews. And that I didn't love. I think I would have, like, it was its own standalone, but it was sort of a bigger, yeah, I don't know. Wasn't my favorite. I don't think I'm going to read the next ones. After that, I read Pandora's Jar, Women in Greek Myth by Natalie Haynes. I gave this 5 stars, and boy, does it deserve every single one of those. This book was freaking fantastic. I could not stop talking about it. I told everybody in my life that I was reading it when I read it. It was just so good. It was so interesting. It was so thought provoking. I I loved it. Um, I really like getting to learn about a subject like mythology or like something like this through like a scholar, somebody who actually knows and who can read all the different versions of stuff and like actually has the breadth to know what's going on there. Um, yeah, I freaking loved it. I just loved it so much. It was so interesting. her perspectives on the different women in Greek myth was so fascinating. It was really cool. Some of the myths I knew, some of the women I knew, some of them I didn't. I really liked learning about the ones that I didn't know. I want to read this again, honestly, because it was a bit dense, and there is definitely like, I don't remember all of it just because there was just so much information, and I couldn't retain it all. So I couldn't regurgitate to you basically anything from this book in terms of like actually being able to do it justice. But I remember how I felt reading this, and it was just amazing. And I would love to read this book again, and I would love to read her other books as well. She's written a lot of other things, and I haven't read any of them yet, but I would love to. It was a 5-star read for me. It was fantastic. The next book I read was Sea Prayer by, this one's going to be Khaled Hosseini. I could be wrong on that. This is a kid's book, like a picture book. I think it's a kid's book. Yeah, it's a picture book either way, and it's kind of like a poem, and it's a refugee story, if I remember correctly. I don't remember the story that well. I gave this a 4-star. I think this should be a 3-star for me. Not because it was like a terrible book, it was a good book, just because I don't really remember it. So I think it would be a 3. So I'm going to change that. Yeah, I don't really remember the story very clearly. I do remember the pictures a little bit, and it was very beautiful. And I would definitely say, like, if that's something that you want to read, like, definitely read it. It wasn't that I have anything, like, it was great. It just wasn't a heavy hitter for me personally. So then after that, I read A Great and Terrible Beauty, which is the first book in the Gemma Doyle trilogy by Libba Bray. This I rated 3 stars, and I'm going to bump this to a 4 because I need to bump that to a 4. I finally listened to these as we're going to get to it. I listened to all 3 of these books in this trilogy this year. I've wanted to read these since I was a teenager. I tried to read them as a teenager, but I got too bogged down and I couldn't, and they didn't have audiobooks at that point in time of these, so I couldn't listen to them on audio, sadly. But yeah, I've wanted to read these for a long time, and this year I finally was just like, I'm gonna go and do it. They're on audio. I'm gonna do it. So I sort of knew kind of the story on these, vaguely. It's private school in the Victorian era, I think. It might be a little bit earlier than that. I don't know. They're historical. Yeah, and there's just like magic and friendship and yada yada. I wanted to read these as a teenager because of the covers and the Victorian, potentially the historical aspect, and the magic and the boarding school. Those are all like surefires for me. And then I wanted to read them even more because as a teenager, I did read, Beauty Queens. I think it's called Beauty Queens. Yeah, by Libba Bray, which is a standalone, and that one did have an audiobook when I was a kid, and I listened to it, available in my library, and I listened to it, and it was such a standout book for me. As a teenager, it was just like mind blowing. Every teenage girl / person who's being raised as a girl should read that book, in my opinion. It was great. Anyway, so I really wanted to read these. I've read some of her other stuff. Libba Bray, she's awesome, as an author. These are, I think these are her first things. So yeah, this one was okay. I I I gave all of these books 3 stars. We're gonna get to the rest of them in a minute here. I felt pretty similarly about all of them, honestly. They were a little bit irritating. I was a little bit irritated by all of them about halfway through, but made it through anyway. I think I might read these again at some point, just for like nostalgia's sake. We'll see. I don't know. But I feel fonder about these in hindsight that I did when I was actually reading them. And just because there's only, we'll skip the next one because I read one thing and then I read the other two. So just for reference, I won't talk about the other two because I gave them all 3 stars. The other two are Rebel Angels and The Sweet Far Thing, and I did read all of them, but I'm not going to talk about them all individually because I feel pretty much the same about all of them. So, yeah, they were pretty okay. They were a fun time. I think I would have liked them a lot better as a teenager than I do now. But yeah, I might read them again at some point. The next thing I read, which is a mammoth of a book, is The Signature of All Things by Elizabeth Gilbert. I gave this 5 stars. This is a fucking 5-star book. I will not stop thinking about this book. Holy shit. I had no idea. I had no flippin' idea what I was getting into. This is one of the standout books of this year for me. I read 80 books this year. Obviously, I don't remember them all that well. This one, I remember. If I made a video that was just the like standout books of this year, which maybe I will after all of these is like a recap, just to like overdo the talking about books, this would absolutely be in it. This book was so fascinating. Like, it was like gravity. It just sucked me right in, right from the beginning. I had no idea. I had no fucking idea what I was getting into. As we've established in the beginning, I read a lot of books with literally no idea what they're about, and this was one of those. I had no idea what it was about. At some point halfway through, I figured out that it was written by Elizabeth Gilbert, who wrote Eat, Pray, Love, which, of course, me living under a rock did not put that together until I saw it, and I was like, what the hell? That kind of blew my mind a little bit. It's so good. This book is so good. It is so deeply researched. It's so dense, like, and it's huge. It's massive. And I listened to it, and it's narrated, I believe it's narrated by Juliet Stevenson. I could be wrong on that, but I think it is. And she's phenomenal as a narrator. I really like her as a narrator. Anyway, it was just so fascinating. It's so long. I was like 2 hours in and I was like, I feel like I've read a whole book already. It's so dense, and yet somehow even at the incredible density of this book, the pacing feels so fast. Like, you just feel like you are just going through it. Like, it doesn't, to me, it didn't feel slow at all. It felt like such a fast paced book while being so rich and deep and like expansive. I haven't read anything like this. It was amazing for me. It was the first book in years that I remember staying up in the night because I was like, I can't stop. I don't know what the hell is going to happen. I need to know what the hell is going to, like, what is going on. And I felt like that through the entire thing. It never dropped for me. It never lagged for me. I was always fascinated. I was always just fully in it. I think I took a break at some point just because I didn't want it to end. Like, it was so, and it was like that right up until the absolute end. Like, I never knew what was coming, and I was so wrapped up in this book. It was so good. I still think about it. It's very much like following a life. So it has that kind of feel where it doesn't necessarily have like a really sharp, cohesive storyline. It's much more sort of like, words fail. I can't. I loved it so much. 100% 5-star. I stand by that. It was freaking incredible. Just stand out. I'm still like, I can't. There were a couple of books I read this year that were like that for me, and that was one of them. And it just, All right. Anyway, moving on. After that, I read A Rule Against Murder, which is by Louise Penny, and it's an Armand Gamache novel. These are crime novels. They're Canadian, which I really love. They're set in Quebec, which I really enjoy. And this is one of the earlier ones. So you'll see in my reading this year that I read the first chunk of these. I've read all the like later ones, but my library didn't have the earlier audiobooks for the first, like, this is number 4, so I guess for maybe the first 4. So I hadn't read those ones, and this year I got them on Audible and I listened to them all. This I gave 4 stars. This was good because it was a Gamache novel, but it wasn't good in the scheme of Gamache novels. I have to say that I love the Armand Gamache novels. I love them, not necessarily as mysteries. That part is less essential to me for them. I love them for the characters. I love them for the setting. I just think they're really, really compelling in their depiction of people. And as we'll get to going through the earlier ones, I don't think the earlier ones are as good as the later ones. So if you're going to start this series, I would recommend really wading through the first chunk. And I don't know. I don't know if it's because I started later in, so I have a I'm coming from a different perspective. I think if I had started, I don't know. It's hard for me to say because my gut instinct is that to say that if I started this series from actually number 1, I don't know if I would have got all the way through it and read the later ones, which I really love. So it's hard to say. In my opinion, this series gets better as it gets further along, which is not always the case, is often not the case. So, yeah, do with that what you will. Yeah, I gave that one a 4 stars. I think it's probably lower. I think it's a 3. I don't really remember it that well. All right. All right, moving right along. We're getting into sort of springtime now. The next book I read was Aragon by Christopher Paolini. My dragon books, as I say. We're going to get into it. I have 2 dragon books series that I kind of read over and over again. So when I'm talking to my person about them, I always go, my and he doesn't know what I'm talking about, and I always go, my dragon books. And then I go, no, this is the other dragon books, because I have 2 dragon series. Anyway, Aragon, I'm sure if you know anything about YA fantasy, you know what Aragon is. This was not a new book for me. This was like my 3rd time reading Aragon. I read them as a teenager when they were coming out, and then this year, obviously, Murtagh came out, and I put it on hold at the library, the audiobook, and it was like gonna be months on the wait list. And so I was like, oh, well, while I'm on the wait list, I'll just read the whole series again. Why not? I'll just read the whole series again, and that'll be fine. And then it got super fucking popular again, and all of them got on massive hold. So it's been a much more drawn out process than I originally thought it was going to be. So yeah. For reference, there's 4 of them, and I'm just starting the last one now. So yeah, but it's all right. I've enjoyed it. Anyway, so I read this again. It wasn't a surprise to me. I've read it before. This is a 5-star read for me. I freaking love this book. I love it. I love so many things about it. In Christopher Paolini's work specifically, I love his pacing. I love how long his books feel and how slow but really like sort of ponderous and thoughtful they feel. I really think that's a standout feature of his voice, and I really love that aspect. And in this book, in Aragon, in the first one, I think it's the best, even though hilariously this is the shortest one in the series, and it's so good. I love it. I think it's my favorite out of all of them, having read them all now, but we'll get to the rest of them later. I'm not going to talk about them as a series. I am going to talk about them individually. All right, and then yeah, we're getting into some things that were a second time through for me, or a third time, or a 50th time. The next book I read was The Goose Girl by Shannon Hale. Again, this is a book from my childhood. I've had a real like re-engaging with my childhood this year, which has been so good for me, and I will talk lots more about that in various contexts. But yes, this is a book that I read as a kid. This is a full cast audio production. I was given this audiobook as a kid on disc, and I remember listening to it a lot. And I had not read this book again in a long time. And I read it again this year, and it's 5 stars. Spoiler alert, it was a 5-star book for me. But one of the things that I read this again at the perfect time, because one of the things that I discovered reading this book again that is so special about this book specifically is that this book has what I like to call a passive protagonist. It has a female protagonist who is not your just classic hero type. She's not just like, yeah, I'm brave and I'm a badass and I'm just going to fight back. She's not like that. And as somebody who wasn't like that and isn't like that and is anxious and shy and feels really vulnerable and scared a lot of the time, this book was just so, I'm getting emotional. This book was just so, so healing to read for me, especially at this point in my life when I'm coming to terms with that and starting to like realize that that's an okay thing and that I don't have to be the warrior girl in order to be good enough. Um, and it was just so cool to read this book and realize that this protagonist was here, and she's just really different than a lot of other protagonists. I feel like a lot of typical protagonists that are shown, female or otherwise, particularly in fantasy books, and I just loved it. I love her journey. I love the way you slowly see her gain her strength and the way her strength looks. I just This was a 5-star read for me. I cried my eyes out. And there is actually a little interview in the back of this book from Shannon Hale talking about writing this story. It's a retelling of a fairy tale, which is another thing that I love. And yeah, and talking about how, in her words, I can hear it in her words being like, the classic thing is just give the girl a sword and like send her off, and how she didn't want to do that, and how she intentionally sort of explored a different world, a different way to be. And I love Shannon Hale's books. I love her retellings specifically. They're really, really good, and this is no exception. It's so special, really special to me specifically. And then after that, I read Anne of Avonlea, which by Ellen Montgomery, which is not, we're going to get into the Anne books here. This is not a new book for me. I've read this book like 100 times. It's one of my safe books. I love it. And surprise, surprise, I still love it. I gave it 5 stars. Not much to talk about there. Canadian classic. Brilliant for any girl who's ever felt like a lot. Yeah, just great, great time. And then after this, I read Namaste is a Greeting by Suma Sabramanimam. I tried to spell it out. I'm a little bit, I have a little bit of switcheroo with words. So sometimes I add letters that aren't there, or I switch letters. So if I come up with a completely bizarre pronunciation of someone's name, that's probably why. This is a kid's book. It's a picture book. I gave this 5 stars. I remember reading this. This was great. It was a good time. I loved it. It had cute pictures. It had a great story. I really enjoyed it. After that, I read Anne of the Island, which is also an Anne of Green Gables book. Lucy Maud Montgomery, Ellen Montgomery. This is number 3. This is my favorite Anne book. This is the one where she goes to university. It's my favorite because it has the most romance in it. This is the romance book. And as we're going to talk about later. I love romances. This is great. Again, not a first time. Read this a million times. Read it again this year. So good. Next, we're moving into my other dragon series. So we have Aragon, The Inheritance Cycle, which is dragons, obviously. And then the next book I read this year was Seraphina, or I guess last year, is called, Seraphina by Rachel Hartman. This is my other dragon series. This is a series of two. So Seraphina, there's two, and then there's another set of books in this same world about Seraphina's younger sister, which we'll talk about later on. But yeah, this is the first one. This is the first one I read. This wasn't the first time I've read it. I've read it before, read it a couple of times. It's a 5-star. This is a phenomenal book. It's so good. Oh my God. Yeah, I just love this book. The dragons in these books can turn into people, and these books are very like kind of politics and religion heavy. They have a lot of stuff about the way those things impact somebody's sense of identity, and they really deal with sort of finding your place and finding yourself. And the world is just so interesting to me. That's a big part of it for these books. The world's really interesting. They're really sort of they have a very, like, the religion in these books is very Catholicism inspired. So there's saints and all of these things. They're just really interesting. The world's really interesting, and they're very thoughtful and really neat. Definitely probably a bit of a trigger warning if you do have religious trauma, specifically related to Catholicism, because the religion is very similar and there's definitely some shit. I would say less with Seraphina maybe, and more with one that we're going to talk about later. But yeah, great book. So cool. The next book that I read is The Blue Castle by Lucy Maud Montgomery. This actually was a first time. I didn't read this as a kid. I didn't have access to an audio copy of it as a kid, so I didn't read it. And then again this year I had Audible for a bit, and so I decided to get this book. And oh my God, I wish that I had read this as a teenager specifically. Again, this was one that just hit right for me this year with where I was at in my own emotional turmoil. This was a 5-star read for me. I've read this book now again. Like I listened to it again. It's just, oh my God, it's so good. This is very much like a feel-good fairy tale in the plot structure. It's very much like everything ends up happy. It's a romance. But the reason that this book was such a heavy hitter for me specifically was because of the main character, Valency's relationship with her family and her relationship with herself. Again, she's a very sort of like, I guess just kind of like shy, quiet, like toe the line kind of character. And basically then something happens to her with her health, and she sort of decides to actually engage with her own life. And for me, as someone who really struggles to engage with my life and with people in my life, this book just hit for me. Her interactions with her family and her experience of her family really, really was. I needed to read this book, and I still need to read this book, and I still need to hear what it has to say. So, yeah, that was a real heavy hitter for me. The next book I read was Death in the Clouds. This is a Hercule Poirot mystery, Agatha Christie. The next book after this is The 450 from Paddington, which is Miss Marple, which is also Agatha Christie. So 2 Agatha Christies in the row here. My family was doing the Hercule Poirot puzzle. Again, this isn't the first time I've read either of these. I grew up on Agatha Christie mysteries. I've read a lot of them. I love them. Neither of these are my favorites, but they're both great. They're not my favorite Agatha Christie books. But yeah, they were both great. It was a fun time. I listened to them with my family. They both got 4 stars. not much to say there. The next book I read is Banyan Moon by, I want to say Tao Tai. I don't know if that's correct, but that's what I want to say. Um, I gave this 5 stars. This was again kind of a weird left field book for me. I liked the cover, I liked the title, and I just said, hey, why not? And I started it and I was like, okay, I'm in. This book is like a multi generational book about trauma and the sort of women in this family, and I just liked it. I found it really interesting. I really liked, I guess, kind of the main character. Um, yeah, it's kind of slow. It's kind of pondery. Um, it was interesting to read. I just liked it. I liked the feeling. I liked reflecting on my own relationship with my mom and my sisters and my grandmother, who I didn't know that well. And yeah, I liked that book. I liked the thoughts of it. It was, yeah, it was a good one. The next book I read was The Island of Sea Women by Lisa See. I gave this 5 stars as well. This book was fucking brutal to read. Like, as in, like, the subject matter is so hard. There were a few times in this book that I was like, I don't know if I'm going to make it. Like, I don't know. I'd started this book years ago and then just stopped. Um, I don't think I hadn't gotten to anything super brutal yet necessarily, but yeah, I wasn't in the right space or whatever, and I just stopped reading it. So I picked it up again this year and I actually finished it. And oh my God, like I said, I almost stopped a few times. It's so brutal. It's so hard. The subject matter is really, really intense. But it is fascinating. It's a historical novel about an island um, of Korea, and the divers, the female divers of that island, and some things that happened on that island. And I didn't know anything about what happened on that island, and I definitely did some reading after this. And it was really good. It's a really good book. I really liked the characters. I really drew me in, and I just, yeah, it's it's about survival and nature and culture and how you cope and process and deal with horrific things happening. It was a really good book. It was really, really good. But definitely hard. Like, if you don't have a lot of bandwidth, this isn't the one, because this requires bandwidth for sure. But I really liked it, and I'm very glad I read it. I definitely talk to everybody around me about it all the time. But it's a hard one for sure. Yeah. And then after that, I read The Name She Gave Me by Betty Cooley. This is, I think, a YA. I gave this 3 stars. This book was fine. I don't really remember it that clearly. I don't think it's anything to do with the book per se. I think I just wasn't in the right space for it, honestly. I think I just wasn't in the right, like, frame of mind. It just didn't really catch me. Yeah, this is about a girl who's adopted, I believe. I don't really remember it that well. Yeah, so nothing to the book itself. I think I just didn't read this in a great space for it. And then next is a book of poetry called Super Important Filipina Thoughts. And oh my God, I'm not going to get this name correctly. And that's so embarrassing because my person is Filipino and I should. But I just. Also, she has 2 last names and I can't tell which is the last name and which is the first name because of the way that they do it here. I think it's Alia Sanzia Rasul. I I don't know. I'll put it somewhere. I gave this 4 stars. This is poetry. I loved this. I did one of the sneaky things where I went to the bookstore and I pulled this off the shelf and I started reading it, and then I finished reading it and put it back on the shelf. It's a poetry book. It's not that long. Anyway, I liked this. I had a great time reading it. It was funny. It was fun. I really enjoyed it. Yeah, I had a good time reading it. But again, I think part of that too was just like I was in the right space. Like I was in the right space and I enjoyed it. So much about reading is being in the right space, but we'll talk about that later. Anyway, next book I read is Bad Vibes Only by Nora McInerney. McInerney. I'm the worst. Yeah, this is essays, and I gave this 5 stars. I freaking loved it. I laughed my head off reading this book. I had a really good time with this one. Yeah, I just it was just a good time. I enjoyed it. I needed that at that point in my life, and I think like it was just good. It really lightened the mood for me. Yeah, and then after that, I read Eldest, which is the second book in the Inheritance cycle. So Christopher Paolini, dragon books, dragons that don't turn into people, not dragons that turn into people. That's how I separate my dragon books. Um, yeah, I gave this 5 stars. Loved it. Not my first time reading it. Not much more to say there. Yeah, and then I read Born a Girl, It Takes Courage by Alice DeSutour. I gave this 5 stars. This is like I guess YA, like, what's the word? Nonfiction. So it has like a bunch of different girls, real girls. I think they might use pseudonyms or something to protect them. I don't know, but it's like a bunch of different girls, real girls from all over the world, different countries, basically discussing their stories about something that's happening in their culture, around gender equity issues. It's got really great art, really cute pictures, and then after the story, there's like some like more resource, like broader factual information about that issue, statistical stuff, things like that. I liked this book. I really liked it. It was it was pretty. It was interesting. I think it dealt well with the things that it did, even though it had sort of a short time frame to do it. So I think that was pretty good. Yeah, made me sad for sure, but not like in an overwhelming way. I found it pretty inspiring actually. So yeah, that was a good one. I gave that 5 stars. And then I read, I don't know why my Goodreads has it not in English. I don't remember why that happened. But anyway, I think this book is called, oh God, I think it's called Merry-Go-Round or Carousel or something like that. I think it's by Sergio Rossi. It's a graphic novel. I gave this 3 stars. It's a bunch of like in sort of intersecting like stories about this various like short stories about these various people in this friend group in high school. It was okay. I liked the art. That's mostly what I remember. Yeah, we're about to do a bunch of graphic novels. So, yeah, it was okay. 3 stars, I would say, is accurate for that one. Then I read The Blue Road, A Fable of Migration. This is by Wade Compton. I gave this 4 stars. This was pretty fascinating. I I would really love to know the story behind this book. Yeah, it was interesting. It's it's a fable of migration. It's very fantastical. It's a graphic novel. It's got really beautiful art. I really liked the art style, and then yeah, I would be interested to know what yeah, just like more about this story. I liked it though. It was an interesting read, and it definitely made me think. So yeah, I enjoyed it. And then another graphic novel, I read The Legend of Antipo. This is by, let me look in close here to figure out which is, oh no, I'm going to ruin it all, but I'm going to do it. Yeah, this is by Sheng Yin Kor, I think. I gave this 4 stars. Again, graphic novel. This is about a girl whose dad works as the cook, and so she also works as cooking staff in a. Sorry, I'm uncomfortable. I need a thing before. Oh, okay. Now I can think. She and her dad work as the cooking staff in what's the word? A lumber camp. Yeah, in the American forests, Midwest, I think. Yeah, and so they work in basically an all-white lumber camp, and they're East Asian. I can't remember if they're Chinese or Japanese. It's been a while since I read it. I think they're Chinese. Anyway, and so it's about like it deals a little bit with like the racial tensions between her family and the camp, and just the way things are different for them, and the relationships within that, and the story of like what it's like to be an immigrant and to sort of try to build up your life and provide better for your children and all of these things. And then it also has a little bit of legend in it. So like the the fables, like the folklore from her family, and she's like seeing this, and she tells stories, and she's seeing the characters from the folklore in the woods. It's cool. I'm explaining it badly, but it's great. I really liked this. I loved the art style. I liked the story. It was just, yeah, it was good. I felt like it had a really nice balance of like heavier issues, but also like some fun things and a bit of magical thing. I liked it. I liked it a lot. And then I read Squire by Nadia Shamas. I gave this 3 stars. I'd wanted to read this for a long time. This is another graphic novel, YA graphic novel, and I wanted to read this for ages. And I finally read it, and it was okay. I mean, I gave it 3 stars, clearly. It's really beautiful. It's really beautiful, but honestly, like, I don't remember it that much. I don't think it made a super lasting impression on me. Yeah. So that's that. And okay, I'm trying to figure out where I should stop. We still have like a ways to go. Like we have a ways to go. So, okay, maybe I'll do this page, and then we'll stop and we'll do the rest of them another time. Yeah. So the next book that I read is, I think, yeah, I'm going to say it. I think this is my favorite book that I read this year. The next book that I read is Fane by Anne Marie MacDonald. And oh my God, like, this is a 5-star read. I think this was my favorite book of the whole year. This book was amazing, and it's massive. It is so big. I listened to this book on audio. I don't know if I would have made it through reading it, but maybe, because it's so fascinating. This book is it's just beautiful. I loved it. I loved it so much. This book has a little bit of magic in it. It has beautiful setting in Scotland. It has like sort of intergenerational storylines a little bit. This book deals with like environmental crises, mental health treatment, intersex issues, gender identity, queerness. It's just but all in this really like beautiful, thoughtful, fascinating way that to me just feels so much more expansive and broad and human. It's not the whole point of this book, it's not the whole identity of this book, but it is there and it is valued. I loved this book. Like I said, it's a bit magical, it's a bit kind of spooky in that way. I loved it. I don't even want to say anything about the plot or the story because I just I want people to read this book not really knowing what it's about. It's even the description, I did read the description because I was waiting for this book. This was one where I saw the cover and I was just like, "Oh, cool title, cool cover. I'll try that." And then I was waiting for it and then I read the description and the description doesn't tell you much about anything. I've already told you too much by telling you what the themes are, what it deals with. But it's just, I loved it. I loved it. It was so beautiful. The writing was so beautiful. I have a quote from it somewhere in my phone, which I should probably pull out for this video, but maybe I will for the end or something. It's just, it was amazing. I'm so happy I read this book. I will never stop talking about it. I will never forget it. It was amazing. It's a masterpiece. It's it's just incredible. And after that, I read Who Owns the Clouds by Mario. Sorry, I can't see that far away. Brassard. This is a graphic novel. I gave this 3 stars. I don't remember too much about the story, although it was interesting. I remember the art in this book, and the art was really cool. Yeah, I think the 3 stars isn't because this is a bad book. Again, I think the 3 stars was just that this one didn't land super hard for me, but I could definitely see it being really impactful for somebody. So, yeah, and it definitely had some really cool art in it. We're doing a few more graphic novels here. We have a real graphic novel tower here. Some of the star ratings you'll notice is that like a lot of it has to do with how things landed for me, and that is really varied on what I like and what I was going through at the time. Yeah, a book has to be very special to get a really bad review from me. It has to have made me actually upset in some way. So yeah, the next book I read was also a graphic novel. Like I said, we're in a graphic novel state here. It's Oxy by Mari Ahakoliu. I hilariously enough, I'm Finnish, and I believe that I think it's a she. I think they're a she. Who wrote this book? I don't remember. But anyway, this is based on Finnish folklore, which I didn't realize until I finished it. I gave this book 4 stars. This is a graphic novel. This book creeped me out. Like, it creeped me out. It had the main character has a certain kind of energy that just scares me. So that's why it kind of creeped me out. And it's a bit creepy. It is a bit creepy. But yeah, so when I finished this book, I was like, oh. I was like, I didn't like it. I don't want to read it again. And I kind of stand by that. But then I was reading about it, and it is Finnish folklore, and I'm Finnish, so that was cool. And I think once the creep factor had sort of like settled for me a little bit, I had a better feeling about this book. But I don't think I'd read it again because it creeped me out. But it's so beautiful. It's a graphic novel, and I really like the art style, and that's part of why I think I gave it a 4, even though it creeped me out. How many times am I going to say it creeped me out? But yes, it's stunning. It's so pretty. And if you like creepy things, and if you like folklore, and if you like Finnish folklore, yes, definitely worth it. It's definitely a good book. It just scared me. It scared me, not in a way I liked. Um, the next book I read is Shuna's Journey by Hayao Miyazaki. I gave this 3 stars. That's an interesting rating, Demeter. Anyway, this is a graphic novel. This was one of his earlier works, and I think if you've seen a lot of his movies, this will feel familiar for sure. It's definitely very reminiscent of certain things, particularly, I would say, a kind of a combo situation between like Nausicaa and, oh God, Mononoke. I was like, what is the word? Not Mononoke specifically, but the prince in Ashitaka. I could be wrong. I think that's right. Anyway, it's very, very familiar, is what I'm trying to say. And if you are familiar with Hayao Miyazaki's work, that will be apparent. It's very beautiful, obviously. And it's quite weird, actually. This one also kind of creeped me out, which I think is part of the 3 star. Definitely creeped me out. It's definitely got a really creepy side thing. And I think I just sort of felt a bit weirdly flat about this. It didn't have the emotional impact that his movies do for me. But I did read the thing at the end. There was a thing at the end about it. And this is before a lot, like, if not a lot, I think maybe all of his work. And like his more famous like movie work. And yeah, that was really interesting. So I would say like if you're into Hayao Miyazaki and you're into his stuff, it's worth reading. It was interesting, and the stuff around it was also interesting. The next book I read is Hikoti. I never knew how to say it. By Lorena Alvarez Gomez. This is a kid's book. Like it's a kind of it's a middle grade graphic novel in it, and it's like big, like a kid's book. I gave this 3 stars. I bought this to send to my nephew, so that's why I read it. And I would say this mostly gets it for me on the art, because the art's freaking great. I don't remember the story that well, but the art is gorgeous. And then I read Season of the Bruja Volume 1 by Erin Duran. This I gave 3 stars. No particular reason for that. It's pretty. It just wasn't my favorite. It just didn't, yeah, left me kind of cold. I just didn't feel a lot about it. It was all right. It was pretty. I read it. But yeah, it wasn't a lander for me. And then I read If You'll Have Me, which is another middle, no, YA, I would say, graphic novel. And this is by Iuni. This was a 5 star read. I freaking loved this book. I did not know what I was getting into. I did not know what to expect. Hilariously from the cover, I was kind of like, eh. And then I read this and I just had such a great time with it. I just loved it. I just loved it. It was just so fun. It was such a good romance. I felt things, you know, I felt little flutters. I felt joy. It was just a great time. I had a great time reading this. It was fully a 5 star. I get happy remembering reading this. It was a good time. This book made me feel things, which is a lot of what my star system is based on. How I felt, what I felt, how much of it. And then, quite harshly, I feel a bit bad about this. We're moving up into The Princess and the Grilled Cheese Sandwich by Dea Muniz. I gave this 2 stars. I feel kind of bad about that, honestly. I don't think it quite deserved 2 stars. I think this is probably a 3. But okay. I think the reason that I gave this 2 stars was that I read it after If You'll Have Me, and If You'll Have Me was so good, and I felt so many things that when I read this and felt basically nothing, I was just mad. I think that's why I gave this 2 stars, because I think I was just angry because I just read something so great and I was like, oh yeah, another cute romance, it'll be a great time. And then I was just like, that's not, no. And I was just so mad. Yeah. Also, I kind of don't, I don't know. This book has a really strong cheese theme, and that just wasn't my favorite. It has its moments, and it's very beautiful. I'll give it that for sure. Like, I love the art in this book. The story just wasn't it for me. But like, if you're into a cute, like, lesbian cross dressing romance with a bunch of cheese theme magical kingdom vibe, like, that's it for you. But it wasn't it for me, and I think I was mad at it after, if you'll have me, honestly. And so then after that I read Witchlight by Jesse Zabarsky, and I gave this 4 stars. This is another graphic novel, YA graphic novel, and this one was good. I liked it. I liked it a lot. This is like an adventure sort of book, I guess. And yeah, I was fully in it. I love the art. Freaking love the art style of this book, and I really liked the story. It was really interesting. I liked both the characters. I liked the fantasy world. Yeah, this was cool. That was a cool book. I would read that one. I'm not telling you much about it, but go look it up. Also, I don't remember the plot that well. And then we're back into regular books, not graphic novels, and this is our last one for this page, and so our last one for this video. And we're ending off on a pretty good note. I read Beach Read by Emily Henry, and I gave this 4 stars. I liked this book a lot, actually. Yeah, this was a nice change of pace, and it sort of sent me into a new zone on my reading, I think, as we'll see in the next one. But I liked it. I liked that book a lot. I really enjoyed it. It was kind of weird, but yeah, I liked it. I liked their relationship. It's basically like 2 rival writers end up neighbors in this like summer cottage area or whatever, and the main character's there because she's living in the house that her dad bought to be with his mistress and then left to her in his will, which I just liked as a weird, kind of horrifying thing that happens to people sometimes in life. You know? Like, that just, I don't know. I liked that. I felt that on some level for some reason. But yeah, I liked it. It was a great time. I enjoyed it. It made me feel things. 4 stars. All right. So that is the first chunk. I don't know how many books we did there. But I think probably about halfway through, because I'm on page 4 now and it's 10 a page and I read 80 books. So yeah, I think that's like halfway. My math is terrible, but I think that makes sense. Yeah. Thanks for my weird rambly chat about my feelings about some of the books that I've read this year, and I will be back for the other half. Yeah. Either on another day or now. I don't know. We'll see. I might have to go eat something. So, yes, thanks for chatting with me. Thanks for listening. I'm gonna go take my rambly self to have a snack, and then eventually we'll do the other half of this, and then we'll talk about 2025 reading goals / stuff, because I love talking about books and things that I read, and I can do too much of it, so I will do too much of it. I hope you're having a great time. Yeah, let me know what was your absolute favorite book that you read this year and why. Or let me know how you use stars in your ranking system, because yeah, I'm kind of curious if anyone else has like a rubric of like what their stars mean to them specifically, because I definitely do. Yeah. All right. Go enjoy your life. Go feel things.